At this point, they might as well call it The Familiars. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2026 slasher sequel, The Strangers, Chapter 3. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and recommendations. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations. So be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. The Strangers, Chapter 3 stars Madelaine Petsch, Gabriel Basso, and Richard Brake, and was directed by Renny Harlin. Set immediately after the events of Chapter 2, it continues the story of a team of masked serial killers as they hunt down an unexpected survivor. Well, we've made it. We've finally reached the final film of this fumbled and completely unnecessary trilogy. The first two Strangers films were already more than enough, but this tacked-on mess of a reboot trilogy has turned the franchise into a completionist's nightmare. It's made the task of watching the franchise far more torturous than anything ever seen on screen throughout the mind-numbing nearly 5-hour combined runtime of the chaptered saga. I always give movies I watch a fair shake, even if I don't like their predecessors. I'll admit that I really wasn't looking forward to watching this movie, and I was even less looking forward to wasting my money to do so. But I truly was hoping that this film would surprise me, that it would somehow be able to recontextualize the drivel that had come before it, and make this bizarre exercise in rebooted recreation worthwhile. Well, I'm here to report that it does not, to the surprise of absolutely nobody. Chapter 3 picks up exactly where Chapter 2 left off, and continues on the path set forward by that predecessor, working to further undermine itself and the very premise upon which the franchise is built. The film quite literally opens with the definition of serial killer plastered across the screen, going as far as to highlight that they're often strangers. It's eye-rollingly cheesy, but it's also absurd because these titular strangers are no longer actually strangers, to us or their haplessly inept victim. The thing that made the original film so unsettling back in 2008 is long gone. Rather than unknown masked strangers, we've got a set of boring killers with elaborate yet totally inane backstories. Chapter 2 of the trilogy revealed the origins and identity of the oft-requested Tamra, but this third chapter dives even further into backstory. Flashbacks haphazardly jump us through the history of these three killers, sometimes when they're kids, sometimes when they're teens, and sometimes only a few years before the events of the film. I'm not sure anybody ever wanted an origin story of these no longer strangers, but we sure got one. As a result, the story shifts away from one of mysterious random killings to one of coercion and bizarre familiarity. It's different, which is certainly something the other chaptered entries in the franchise don't really have going for them. I don't want to spoil the bizarre surprise, if you could call it that, for the other 17 people who have made it this far into the franchise, but suffice it to say that this story strays so far from the franchise's most basic premise that it's almost unrecognizable. Almost. If it wasn't for the all too familiar awfulness of just about every aspect of the film. The shift in story direction is absurd, and the demystification of the strangers' characters is a baffling choice, but the terrible qualities extend to include all of the same problems that have plagued the entire franchise. The dialogue remains abysmal, the performances and line deliveries laughable, the character choices utterly nonsensical, and without a shred of self-preservation. We get all the same dull characters again, plus a few new ones, whose inclusion is both pointless and absurd at the same time. Really, I have a hard time finding the words to express how truly terrible this trio of new characters is. The editing remains amateurish, something that's only further highlighted by the film's non-linear narrative, with constant time jumping that makes the movie choppy and the story confusing to follow. And if you thought, rightfully so, that chapters 1 and 2 were devoid of scares or tension, just you wait. This dull story plods along with no tension or urgency whatsoever. Even if you actually still cared about Maya at this point, this movie never makes you fear for her safety. If anything, it offers up the antithesis of tension, and honestly makes it a challenge to even stay conscious. It's the final film of a trilogy, and yet it doesn't even really wrap its own story up, let alone in a satisfying way for the broader franchise. It just feels like a bizarre set of ideas haphazardly thrown together and called a film, poorly closing out a trilogy that never needed to exist in the first place. How any of these movies, let alone all three, managed to get theatrical releases is beyond me. But at least this travesty of a trilogy is finally done. I really don't think I would have had it in me to review another one. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest and really only pro here is that it's over. Is that excessively mean to say? Is that cheating? I don't know, and I don't even care at this point. I mean, this whole rebooted, rehashed trilogy was just a waste of oxygen and film, or hard drive space, as the case may be. This completes, sort of, the bizarre and unnecessary story arc. I'm not sure if it really accomplishes what it set out to do, since exactly what that is has been unclear from the start, but at least we're finally free. On the con side, the biggest issue is the screenplay. The writing has been a major issue throughout this trilogy, and that trend continues here. Hey, at least it's consistent. Should we throw that up in the pros too? The dialogue's awful, the story's nonsensical, the characters continue to make the dumbest, most illogical choices possible. The whole thing just feels so haphazardly written. Characters come and go with little purpose, the story jumps all over the place, chronologically speaking, and perhaps strangest of all, it completely strays from the premise and horror conceit of the franchise. Con number 2 is the lack of tension. Again, this is another issue that's plagued this entire reboot trilogy. Hooray for consistency. And if anything, this third chapter might just take the no tension cake. When there's literally a scene where Maya sits down and does a shot with one of the strangers, you just know that this film is gonna have nothing to offer. No scares, no tension, no believable emotion of any kind from any of the characters. It kind of makes you wonder if this was even trying to be a horror film. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying The Strangers Chapter 3, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies or anything else. I'm gonna give The Strangers Chapter 3 1.5 out of 5 paws. It manages to be the most unique of the trilogy, which I suppose bizarrely translates into making it the most watchable of the three, but the story strays almost unrecognizably far from The Stranger's premise, and is plagued by terrible writing, awful performances, and an utter lack of tension. At least it's finally over, and when that's the best thing you could say about a film and franchise, you know it's rough. I would recommend The Strangers Chapter 3 only to fellow masochistic completionists. This film has almost nothing to offer, but if you've made it this far into the franchise, you might as well see it all the way through, because this is the final film of this bizarre reboot trilogy. If you liked The Strangers Chapter 3, I would recommend Vacancy. Like certain sequences in Chapter 3, this horror film is set at a motel and stars Luke Wilson and Kate Beckinsale as a couple who find themselves stranded at the isolated in-hospitality location, pursued by masked killers trying to make a snuff film. The plot and characters are thin, but it still manages to be a sufficiently tense film. If you're looking for another recent slasher, you might want to watch In a Violent Nature. It's a film that'll probably be best remembered for its gimmicky over-the-killer's-shoulder perspective, lethargic pacing, and a handful of gnarly kills, but with its abandoned logging camp setting, this is another movie that uses a sawmill to great and particularly gory effect. And if you thought the third act shift of Chapter 3 was intriguing, you should check out Chained. This is another serial killer film that gets at ideas of legacy and the perpetuation of the crimes. Vincent D'Onofrio plays a serial killer who kidnaps the young son of one of his victims and raises him as an accomplice. It's creepy, much better made, and explores some of the concepts Chapter 3 attempts to get at, but in a much more interesting way. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen The Strangers Chapter 3? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's the most consistently bad franchise you could think of? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this review, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.